Hello, local hour audience. Is this even a local hour? Chris Whittingham and I wanted to do something a little special for you because MLS is back. And Chris Whittingham, congratulations once again to you, as you will be a part of the Apple broadcast team, bringing us the exclusive coverage of MLS. That's right. Regional coverage is kind of gone now. If you're an MLS season ticket holder, you have this package for free. So check your emails if that is indeed the case. If not, there are different price points for different types of packages that you can get on Apple. This is not going to be a shilling for Apple. I imagine you'll be doing that plenty. By the way, how will I be able to see your ankles?
We don't know for the broadcast themselves how much you're going to be on camera, but rest assured, if I am on camera, there will be some ankle.
Yeah. Were you given an Apple style guide?
Yes, I was, and in the style guide, there are a few pictures that involve wearing boots and or dress shoes, but I would be surprised if you see a lot of boots or dress shoes on our coverage of Major League Soccer this season. It's very young, very kind of more modern. They like to use the word smart casual is the theme of the day.
Smashable. Witty, are you on a broadcast this weekend?
No, I'm off. There's like more than the number of teams in MLS, number of broadcasters. So I'm off in week 1. I actually start on match day 3 because I'm in a wedding next weekend. So I start on match day 3 in Nashville.
Unfortunate timing.
Yeah.
Salute to Josh Appel. Congratulations.
It's one of those where
finally tying the knot in his 50s after all that. Very happy for Josh Appel.
It's one of those where like you agreed to be in the wedding the year before, and then you get told hey, you want to do something in this place in week 2? It's like, well, got a thing.
Witty and I are also 2 very proud graduates of the University of Miami, and we'll preview a very exciting
You might be more
game.
proud of having graduated from UM than me.
Yeah. I mean, it took me a long time, but I finally did that walk. All right. So, Witty, let's talk MLS, but let's specifically talk about Inter Miami to begin. I mean, I've probably bored the audience at this point with all the Messi stuff, but that is looming over the roster construction for this year. Early on, I think it's going to be a tough go of things for Neville and company, because this roster construction has 2 pretty big gaping holes. And the manager has spoken on it. I've spoken about it on the show. I've told you that Busquets is happening. That'll be in July. I'm growing more and more confident with each passing day and with how people inside that organization are behaving, that Messi indications are that this might actually happen, which we'll do loads of stuff there. But right now they have gaping holes because those 2 players are not here right now, and they're going to go with 2 strikers that do not track back on defense, and they're asking a lot of that back line and their central defense. Why don't you get in the weeds right now and give some people some information on what Inter Miami is facing, at least for the first half of this season?
Yeah, and they don't start with a particularly easy schedule either in terms of the way that those teams are going to set up. So they're basically going to set up in a very attacking, a very aggressive shape that we actually saw towards the end of last season, which is playing, as you said, with 2 strikers, which you do not see very often. And more often when you do, you see it with 3/5 defenders on the back line. And so it's a base from which to operate, whereas Miami, I think, are going to operate from the perspective of, we need to score more goals. We need to be better in the attack. And so they want to get 2 strikers and also the support to help them. So perhaps surprisingly, you have Rodolfo Pizarro playing a big role in that. He was the club's first ever massive DP signing. He was brought in to be the pull the strings number 10 that they hope Lionel Messi might be at some point this season. But he's just not that guy. He's not that guy. And so they're playing him in more of his usual role as a central midfielder, box to box. And I've seen him in preseason twice, and he's playing pretty well. That's his role. That's what he is meant to do. And so I actually think that aspect of it could work.
Let's say on Roddy Pizarro for a little bit, because his time in Miami has been an interesting one. There have been high points. He was an MLS All-Star. I mean, take that for what it is. Wasn't he selected by the commissioner too? It was a very
I think it was a late replacement for somebody, and he
was in good form.
He had like 3 good games in a row. It's like,
he was in good form at the right time.
It was also, I believe, the first year that they were introducing the MLS versus Liga MX format. So getting a big Mexican star into that game probably didn't hurt his cause.
Right. Their inaugural season, Roddy Pizarro came in with all the hoopla. That was their big number 10. That was the first big DP that they got. And this was a guy that was headed into the prime of his career and been a disappointing signing so far. He wasn't a part of the plans last year, loaned out to Liga MX. Back in the fold, I can tell you with 100% certainty, Inter Miami tried like hell to get out from this contract, try to move him. His name was brought up in the Joseph Martinez acquisition, which we'll talk about in a little bit. He did not want to go there. Right now, the club is kind of handcuffed to him until Messi comes out here. They do not want to buy him out because it's going to be a hefty price tag for an MLS club. They're trying and hoping that Pizarro can take this opportunity in front of him, and some team will be able to take this player off their books. He's got a lot of talent. You've been at training sessions, like you mentioned. He scored a worldie. Everything sets up for him to really be the talisman on this Inter Miami side. Does he have the desire to? There's a Carlos Vela, led by Carlos Vela. There's a Mexican generation that they're often hit with bad body language, and people hit them with, how much do you care about the game? Do you really love the game? And sometimes his effort is good, but most of the time it's inconsistent. Let's dive a little bit deeper into Roddy Pizarro, Witty.
Yeah, I think the biggest actually aspect of his game is not going to be what he provides in the attack. It's going to be, he's asked to play a role in the middle in which you are not only going to defend, but you have to defend fairly big swaths of space. So they're playing out of what is called a 4-4-2 diamond, and it's a very narrow shape. You're basically having your two wide midfielders play kind of the width of the center circle, and the idea is you sort of flood the middle and try and create chances through the middle of the field. But the problem is when the ball turns over, those guys have to sort of branch out and become wide players. So those two positions, the ones that Pizarro and likely John Mota will be playing, are the ones that require the most covering of ground. It's an enormous expenditure of energy, and it has seemed as though Pizarro is up for it in preseason, but I mean, that's a lot different doing it in preseason in February as opposed to in the intense heat of May, June, July, and August in MLS. It's a very different animal. You're aided a little bit by the fact that you don't have any more afternoon games, really, for the most part. In MLS, all the games are kicking off at 7:30 for the most part around the league, which is, I think, a great development. But this is a tough challenge. And then, from an attacking standpoint, they're committing numbers into the attack, particularly in home matches. I'll be curious how it looks different away from home. They've always been more naturally conservative away from home. But at home, they commit numbers, they press, they go forward. They're trying to flood the middle zones and create chances for their strikers. But do they have the creativity in their ranks? And that, in terms of holes, by not getting Messi you wouldn't have gotten Messi from the beginning of the season. But in keeping your powder dry for Messi, you did not replace Alejandro Pozuelo, the creative influence who really turned last season around. They made the playoffs because of him. And so you couldn't keep him, and you can't replace him unless you get Messi or somebody else in July. You're not going to replace him at the start of this season. And so you have to figure out ways to create goal-scoring chances for the first 4 months of the year, and that might be what slows them down.
And this is where chasing Messi has its pitfalls, because Pozuelo, former MLS MVP, turned last season around. That acquisition was massive. He was a brilliant player for them. They have these DP slots that they have to play with. They're considering buying out Pizarro. You have all these moving pieces, and Busquets, who probably won't be a DP. He'll be something called a TAM player. We're not going to get into that. But don't worry, I don't necessarily think he'll be a DP player. He wanted money, and he was hanging around for a little bit trying to see what Inter can do, but they were holding on to a DP slot for Lionel Messi. So one of the best midfielders in MLS goes to Turkey, and you have a pretty big hole in your attack, and you're asking a lot for players like Joseph Martinez, which I promise you we'll get to, Campana, and Roddy Pizarro. But I want to talk about one of the strengths of this team from just what the projected team sheets look like, and it's the defense. Drake Callender, I thought, was a stellar goalkeeper, really one of MLS's better goalkeepers. And
was a finalist for goalkeeper of the year.
Yeah, and you're going to need good goalkeepers to make noise in this incarnation of the MLS playoffs, which is going to lean a lot on PKs, and you're going to need a goalkeeper that's going to flash a special ability. And I think Callender is capable. Lowe was a good defender for them, But Kieran Gibbs also retires. I saw you had the exclusive on that, Witty. Gibbs had a brilliant career, but wasn't consistently playing for Inter Miami, and there was a mutually beneficial option that presented itself, and an international spot. It opens up. Read into that, if you will. But they have DeAndre Yedlin, who just was a part of the U.S. men's national team roster in this most recent World Cup. Noah Allen is a really exciting player, but he just picked up an injury, and that's been kind of the story around him. Really promising young player that's made a couple of international appearances for the U20s side. What can you tell us about this back line for Inter Miami?
Yeah, so they decided that they wanted to take a step forward at that position, which is really interesting because I think they sort of identified as like, we need a player of another echelon at center back. And so they went and got this player from Ukraine. His name is Serhiy Krivtsov, who is going to be kind of that big step forward. He is I think he won the Ukrainian League 8 times with Shakhtar Donetsk.
He has loads of of Champions League experience with Shakhtar and tons of caps for the Ukrainian national team.
Yeah, and so
it's a weird MLS signing. This isn't exactly
it's a
Ryan
weird MLS signing.
Shawcross.
And dude, I heard stuff about his story. Like, he is not fighting in the war in Ukraine because he has 3 children and not 2. Like, wow. That is the only reason why. So like, basically there's a law in Ukraine where if you have 2 children, you have to fight in the war, but if you have 3, then you don't have to fight. But that's the only reason why. And Shakhtar Donetsk are not playing in Ukraine right now. Obviously, you wouldn't play in a war-torn country. They're playing their home games in Poland, and so he was staying in Poland. And I was told that for his, as an initiation thing, a lot of players have to like sing a song in front of the group. The song that he chose to sing was a Ukrainian war chant. And it got the entire team up on their feet and like behind, like, this guy is going to lead the team, strong figure. And also, having seen him play one game, he's sort of this very calm and cool presence. And I think he'll keep things organized. And he'll play next to Chris McVey, who is a versatile, solid defender. I just think the team kind of pivoted towards solidity on that back line. They have a new Argentinian left back who will probably start the year. You mentioned Noah Allen. I'm really intrigued by 3 Inter Miami Academy products just to see if Miami start to bring some young players through. That's probably the next big step for them to take. They have a young 17-year-old who they signed from the academy, Benjamin Kremaski, who is also an Argentina Youth International already at 17 years old. They have another center back who I actually thought was going to start last year, if not for a torn ACL in preseason, Ian Frey, and Noah Allen, who you mentioned had a torn MCL in preseason. I want to see some young players come through, because that's actually one of the big themes for people that don't know about MLS. They've made some really big sales abroad this transfer window. Montreal sold 3 of them. Chicago Fire sold their star Colombian striker for $18 million. This league is starting to sell its young prospects for big money across the pond, and yet it's still undervalued because the MLS market is still fairly immature in terms of selling players. You can find value in this league. And so I'll be curious if Miami can start to join that fray a little bit this year.
So you can't talk about a back line without talking about the defensive midfielder that a lot of this responsibility to track back is going to fall on. Sounds like with Yedlin, at least one side, I don't know how pacey the other fullback is, but it sounds like they at least have some pace to track back. But Gregory's going to have to be all world for them. And Jean Mota, who I think you can call him a disappointment on starting those counters of their own, is going to be essential, at least here in the early going, in a Messi-less world. What can you tell me about those 2 players in particular? Gregory's going to have a load of responsibility, and they have opened up some general allocation money to buy him down should they cross that Messi bridge when they get to it in the summer. But a lot of responsibility is going to fall on the shoulders of Gregory.
And I do think that this offseason sort of signaled his value as a player. He was linked with multiple moves back to his home country of Brazil for fees over $3 million. So this is a good player who's.
Why didn't they sign him? Why didn't they transfer him out?
They need him.
They need him to bridge to Busquets.
Well, I also think you need him with Busquets if you indeed get him, because Sergio Busquets, I saw him yesterday in the Europa League. He's, he's not. He's not the
MLS.
And his.
We can be honest about Sergio Busquets. Yeah. He's hitting MLS at the right time in his career, and honestly, Busquets is kind of like a combo move because of his close relationship with Lionel Messi. It's like he's basically recruiting him.
And I think you when you bring Busquets in, you want to play a certain game. I think that game is very difficult to play in MLS, where basically you want to calm the game down and allow him to dictate the tempo with the quality of his passing. It's just very difficult to pull that off. The overall level of every team is so similar. Every team is so intensity, pressing, athleticism based that there is just a natural disruption that happens. It's difficult to play with that sort of quality with the level of player you have in MLS. And so you're going to need that defensive solidity next to him. So I don't think, like, even if you think about letting him go because you can get some money for him, you need him as a player in Gregory. So he's going to play a huge role in breaking up counterattacks. I imagine just on the basis of how the shape looks out, like, he's going to take a fair number of yellow cards, which he has done over the course of his Miami career. He's going to have to be smart with it. He's going to have to take fouls at the right times and also win the ball, which he is very good at. But a huge, like you said, when you play a diamond and he's the base of it, that's a massive, you're covering a lot of ground. You're putting out a lot of fires, and he's going to have a huge year.
So this is Inter Miami's version of N'Golo Kante and Jorginho, because Jean Mota is going to be starting a lot of those counters. Was I too harsh in being slightly critical? I wasn't that impressed with Jean Mota, but a lot like Jorginho did for Chelsea in his heyday and in his international cap days for Italy, you don't really quite appreciate what he brings to the game from just watching it. The other players around him will tell you how instrumental he is. Tell us about this very difficult player to evaluate.
Yeah, so he has a really powerful left foot, Jean Mota, and I think his key, particularly in this shape again, is you have a lot of players in the middle, and where the space is going to open up is out wide. And so his role, he kind of play in kind of like the right side of the midfield. So he gets onto his left foot to hit big switches out to the left side, or he'll turn and slide in DeAndre Edlin going right. It's a distribution role. And like you say, it's kind of difficult sometimes when you're at a game or you're not kind of rewatching it to sort of just see the 10-yard balls that get you from back to front, but they're really important. And that's his role to play. He also does not mind a crack from a few yards out. If I were to make a prediction, it would be Jean Mota will have at least one banger that we'll tweet about. Bangers only in Major League Soccer. He loves to strike. I actually looked it up. On like a minimum number of 50 shots, he had the longest average distance of those shots taken. It was 23 yards. So he does not mind a strike from long range.
Yeah, he's going to have a banger, but I think part of the frustration is when you bring a player over from South America, you expect, especially when you saw his stat lines from international competitions down there, that he would be a little bit more active when it came to goal contributions, but I guess maybe they're using him a little bit differently. I also think if we're looking at this roster beyond the first half of the season, he might be odd man out when it comes to some of these lineups that they have to put out. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits in. But early half of this season for Inter Miami, an instrumental player. Let's talk about the exciting things. Everybody wants to see goals. Everybody wants to see goal scorers. They have two strikers now, which, as we already covered, that's kind of a rarity these days in the game. One of which is a former MLS MVP that they are not playing. They are not paying DP money to. He wanted to be in Inter Miami. Josef Martinez, at peak form, was MLS's best player. Terrifying to go up against, but he had a bad knee injury and he fell out of favor with Atlanta, and it kind of became a toxic relationship, and he wasn't putting forth his best effort. If Josef Martinez can somehow tap back into what he was prior to that knee injury, it's a brilliant move. But there are so many question marks around this player, especially when you pair him with another striker that's a young DP for you in Campana.
Yeah, and I think that the combination between the two of them is going to be a huge part of the success or failure of this move. We saw them combine a couple times. One time, it led to a really good chance against Austin. I was at that game in preseason, and his shot was saved by the Austin keeper. But if the two of them can work together to create chances, that's huge. I think he is going to find chances in this team. I think he's going to have his opportunities, and the question is, does he still have that lethal finish in front of goal? Phil Neville has also talked about in the preseason that he's still working his way to full fitness, and I imagine we'll kind of be 2 weeks into the year before that happens in full. But it's a question mark that actually is a really exciting question mark for this team because, like you said, he hit for 31 goals in a season, which was the then record in MLS in 2017. I think he hit for 27 the year after, including setting the league record for scoring in 15 consecutive games. This was the player who you did not want to play against. He was the first name where you go, oh, we're playing Atlanta today. Who do you got to stop? It's Josef Martinez, because he was that good of a player. But that club in bigger terms fell off They came out of the gates firing with Tata Martino as their coach and Miguel Almirón. They sold to Newcastle for $25 million. It was the model club from day one in Major League Soccer, and they're still a model club. They have like 35,000 season ticket holders, but
and they made some very interesting signings.
Yes.
I think that they're going to have a turnaround season.
I agree, and there's I think going to be more competently run now as well with Garth Lagerwey as sort of the big GM figure in Major League Soccer taking over there. But it just didn't work out. They had multiple coaches. The culture kind of fell off there, and Joseph wanted to maintain this is who we are, and threw his weight around in the locker room, and kind of got the label of difficult guy to deal with. I have to be honest, for having been around the team a few times in this preseason, he seems fun. He seems a great character.
He coached you in the media game.
Yeah, he coached me in the media game. He said, if you don't run, you won't play, which is a delightful message to get from Joseph Martinez. But I think like from an emotional standpoint, from a happy around the camp standpoint, I just think he is going to be in a better position. And if he finds anything like the form he had in his first 3 years in Major League Soccer, Miami are going to be way better than I think some of the projections have them at right now. I saw like 538 have them as the 4th worst team in MLS. If you have a player like Joseph Martinez who scores a goal every week, it's pretty damn hard to not at the very least be a playoff caliber team in this league.
You're going to get nothing from him defensively, though.
Yeah,
nothing.
Yeah,
nothing. I mean, and he's that special when he's on form and fit that you make that concession with a big smile on your face. Will the other striker do any defensive work, or are they going to have to turn to the bench in moments like Lassiter can go out there and press? I think he's going to have an important role off the bench for this team, and depending on the opponent. But the striker partner for Joseph Martinez in Campana, this was a guy that might have gotten an Ecuadorian call-up. He was on such great form. He was keeping the comeback player of the year on the bench until Gonzalo Higuain had this marvelous career turnaround. And now all of a sudden you're in a situation where you really miss Gonzalo Higuain. This is a bit of a question mark, because when he's on, he is worthy of a young DP slot.
Yeah, I mean, he basically turned around last season. If you remember, at the start of last year, they had 1 point from their first 5 games. Phil Neville was under a huge amount of pressure, and Higuain was basically banished for a little while, and they basically said, we like how Campana is training. And he then went out and had a hat trick against New England for them to win their first game of the year. And they went on a little bit of a run of form at the start of the year, which they absolutely needed. And he had several patches he scored a huge goal in DC that helped them make the playoffs. He is a real talent. And you can just tell from looking at him. He has enormous power in his left foot. Yeah,
just your classically
he's a unit
striker.
Yeah. He's a unit and really good guy around the camp as well. And so he's going to have to figure out, like you say, sort of to play a complementary role with Joseph Martinez. He's a very good kind of first touch little flick, and he'll have to use that size to maintain possession of the ball when they hit it long. They target him, and he's got to be a little bit stronger and better in the air. But you're right. I think a large burden on him falls on his ability to press. And if Miami do go, he has to be a huge part of not just getting there, but winning the ball back, or slowing down their buildup so that they can get back into a normal shape and go again defensively. But at times when I've seen them in preseason, there are openings to play through that back line. I thought Austin are one of the best possession teams in the league. We're able to find the spaces. The question is, when you come up against teams that aren't as good, can you at least create 1 or 2 goal-scoring chances a game on the basis of winning the ball up the field with your forwards? And that really is the big question at this moment.
I think they'll find their goals. I have 2 main concerns for Inter Miami for this first half of the season. It's their ability to stop the counterattack, and number 2 is depth. Sneakily, they lost quite a bit of depth this offseason. Yeah, they bring in Joseph Martinez, and there are some exciting names that are new to the team that you can work up a decent amount of excitement for. But Indiana Vasiljev is on St. Louis. He was a hugely important impact player off the bench. I think I saw Breck Shea at a Panther game. I don't know what the deal is there. I've never really quite understood what the deal is with Breck Shea. What does the depth for this Inter Miami side look like?
I think there are a few players that come back, but there are also players that kind of need to prove their worth. I think they signed a player from France, and the audience might get annoyed with how I say his name, but his name is Corentin Jean, and he's getting paid decent money. We looked at the MLS salary release last year. They expect him to be an important attacker in this team. He might start in the number 10 role, but I think he's definitely going to play all over in terms of the attack. He's got to be a big depth piece. They probably need to find another player in the depth in the center of midfield. Victor Ulloa is kind of the replacement right now. Busquets will eventually play that role if indeed he comes here, but they probably need a little bit more there. They've got cover at left back. I think they've got cover at center back. But yeah, there are a couple of areas where you go, I don't think they're as strong. But the biggest difference between this year and last year is last year they brought in 19 new players. And this year, they at least have a little bit more of a base from which to start from, where they go, this is proven, we made the playoffs with this team in MLS, and we can kind of build on our system year over year, not starting from scratch like you did last year. So I think there's a little bit more to build from, but yeah, there are definitely some areas where players are going to have to step up.
All right, let's cover expectations for this team. They're a really hard team to set a certain standard for because you have the Messi thing hanging over it. The good news is if they get into an early season hole, the MLS playoffs have kind of been expanded. And if you're one of those higher seeds, you're guaranteed a home playoff game, which was part of the frustration when they ended up playing at Citi Field. And it was a shell of a team. Everybody was pretty banged up, but it was a major achievement just to get to the playoffs last year. Can they not only get to the playoffs, but make some noise in the playoffs? And keep in mind, that's not the only hardware available. In Kooky MLS, there's the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup, which is open to all levels of professional football in this country, and the brand spanking new Leagues Cup between Liga MX and MLS, which is going to be a blast, a World Cup style tournament featuring all the clubs from Liga MX to Mexico and MLS. Can Miami fill their trophy case for the first time ever if they get Lionel Messi? Because I think we know what the answer is if they don't. But I imagine the first half of the season is going to be difficult. It generally is for Neville coach teams. They have this amorphous shape, and you'll know right away how the season's going to go early on by seeing how that team gels from the very beginning. I am pleased with the continuity, but what should my rational expectations be if Messi comes into a side in July, which is when that Leagues Cup is going down? A lot of times DPs come over with a lot of fanfare and people expect them to be a cure-all. This league takes some acclamation, but he is the greatest player of all time. What is rational, Chris Whittingham?
I think rational is middle of the conference. So somewhere between 6 and 9, I think, for Inter Miami this year. But I'm a little bit more optimistic than I think the consensus is on this team. If you look at the MLSsoccer.com preview and the predictions, there are some people that have Miami finishing 14th in the East, and there's some people have Miami finishing 6th. Yeah. So it's
some very interesting names attached to those predictions.
But to me, I think I'd have to put the ball in your court on this one. What's the status of Messi at this moment? Because if he comes in, it's just hard to fathom that Lionel Messi would come in the league. And by the way, he would have some time to acclimate in terms of league play because they only have 2 league matches after the transfer window opens, away at DC and away at St. Louis, who are going to be 2 of the worst teams in the league this year. If they can get a win or a draw from those games, then they'd have Leagues Cup, and you'd have the ability to bring Messi along either as, you go out in the tournament early and you can kind of get acclimatized, or you go on a run in that tournament and you're building form. But there's not a ton of league play that's happening after Messi initially joins. Then you'd have him for the stretch run. But are they going to have Messi? And if they don't, I imagine all of Inter Miami's eggs are in the Messi basket at this moment in time.
Yes.
But if they don't,
that I can 100% confirm. Yeah, this is all about Messi.
But they would have other targets in the summer that would improve them significantly.
Yeah, and the playoffs, right, Whittingham? Like the playoff format now with 2 out of 3 and
9 teams making it each conference.
It actually helps a team that's constructed the way that Inter Miami is hoping to be, with having these really big impact players come on later in the season, hoping to find better form over the course of a best of 2 out of 3. The better team generally wins those. And I know deeper into it, we get back to a more traditional playoff format, but I think the league is kind of structured right now for Lionel Messi to jump into this lineup and have a lot of success, but he could be jumping into any team. He's that great. He's one of the best players in the world right now. He's going to win the best player in the world for this season, considering that World Cup performance that he put up, which is one for the ages. Am I crazy for thinking they can win the Eastern Conference if Messi is indeed happening?
So here's why I don't think it'll happen. So if you look at the schedule, the transfer window, I believe, opens on July the 5th. which is when Messi would put pen to paper. Now, we don't know how quickly after July the 5th he would join because PSG will have a long club season that will probably end in late May, and he will go on a summer vacation, and then he will come back and have to work his way to full fitness. So Miami will have played 22 of their 34 league games by the time we get to Leagues Cup. And so even if he plays even in a bench role against DC or St. Louis, then you don't start to get the full Lionel Messi impact until match day 23, and there's just not enough time left to climb all the way to the top of the East. I don't even.
But they do have that other competition where he can grow into it a little bit. That doesn't count against. Yeah,
for sure. But like it would have to be like you win 10 out of your last 12 with Messi in order to like make a push towards getting a home playoff spot.
Not impossible.
I mean, he's freaking Lionel Messi. Like you can't put anything past him. Right. But I do think that in terms of regular season, I think you're probably hoping for top 6 if you get Messi.
All right.
And you want to be either have a good matchup to where you have to win an away game against a not so difficult opponent like your Phillies of the world in round 1, and then you're in a single elimination tournament. But I think this season is about how well they tread water until they get Messi in terms of the actual outcome of the regular season. You got 20 to 22 games before he arrives in full. How do those games go? Can you win 8 or 9 of those? And that will probably put you around 8th or 9th by the time he arrives within striking distance of going on one of those sorts of runs? Or is it you're struggling to figure things out and you're towards the bottom of the Eastern Conference and you need him to be your savior? I don't think you want him to be your savior. I think you want to have enough of a base where you feel strong about this team even without Lionel Messi. And that's the questions that they got to answer against the likes of Montreal. I think Montreal is oddly a huge game to open the year because they sold 3 of their best players. They changed manager. They're going to be a different team. You're probably not going to recognize a lot, not that you would recognize a lot of players on CF Montreal in normal circumstances, but the players that you have come to know these last few years are gone. So that's a team you should be beating and at home in week 1, but it's a lot of this will get determined pretty early in the year of how well they're going to tread water until they make their big summer acquisition, whether it is Messi or someone else.
So if people are listening to this with just casual fandom, they've probably hit 30 seconds forward, trying to get to this exact moment, hoping that I would just flatly tell them Lionel Messi is going to be a member of Inter Miami. I'm not going to do that. I think if I had to bet on it, I've bet on Inter Miami winning the Eastern Conference. So that'll tell you where my confidence level is. I will tell you that my sources are acting a little bit differently this week. And I actually don't necessarily think that's a bad thing on how they're carrying themselves right now. I know from previous reporting that I've done, Inter Miami was hoping to have an answer before their season started. That was a timeline that they were discussing with Messi's camp. Why is that the timeline? Well, there was DPs, and you can lead it up all the way to today at 5 o'clock. I think you have to have your DPs set for match day 1. And I actually think it has more to do with evaluation, and the real deadline is when those shovels go into the Mel Reese Stadium location, because the valuation goes up on the franchise. And as you know from my reporting and others, that Messi's going to have an ownership stake if he chooses to sign with Inter Miami. I'm hopeful. I'm genuinely hopeful that this signing is going to happen. I'm more confident than not that Lionel Messi will be playing for Inter Miami this season, which is wild. I know some of you are listening to this saying, why this season? Why can't he's so good. Why can't he just stay in Europe? Barcelona's out there. Barcelona has not made their presence felt at all in these conversations at last I checked, which was last week. They flatly not discuss, and I think anything
and they're out of the Europa League now.
They're out of the Europa League.
Their financial situation is a nightmare.
Yeah. And Miami's offer to Messi is competitive. It's not going to match the weekly wage that he's going to get at PSG, but that's not what Lionel Messi's career now is focusing on.
But is it even that far away though now? Because there are report and the thing that's changed, and you've done your reporting, you've done a brilliant job with this, but the reports out of Europe are far more negative and far more realistic, I would say. And this might sound ridiculous, but they're saying that his salary, PSG could be asking him to take a pay cut to 30 million euros, which that all of a sudden, like an MLS offer is in the ballpark of 30
So,
of 30 million
yeah,
euros. It's
especially
not that far. It's not like, we sort of thought like, oh, the PSG will just offer him 100 million euros a year, and you just can never compete with that. But
yeah,
PSG,
they don't lose players. They don't lose players because they
right,
operate in certain shady aspects too. You never know
right.
what's not adhering to financial fair play. Uh, there has been. I'm glad you mentioned the tone change, because the reports from some of the most reputable soccer writers in the world 2 months ago was this deal was basically done, 90% done. Messi will continue with PSG, and I retweeted with comments saying, "Prepare for about 1 million more of these." And the narrative is going exactly how I told you it would so far. And the narrative will end with the reports coming out of France that basically PSG didn't want him, because they're not going to take a public L like that. And oh, he's just off to the retirement home. They desperately want Messi back. They you could tell that bravado has not gone away. They expected him to easily re-sign with them, and he turned down. The reports out of France are he turned down the most recent contract extension. That's not something that you do when 90% of it is done. By the way, my reporting has been right. I've been right. If you want to make Messi signing a zero-sum game, which a lot of you idiots are, and it's just going to be what jersey he holds up, then you know what? I feel a lot better about my chances today than I did yesterday. And tomorrow I'll feel even better. So I think
with each day that goes by, it's why hasn't he just extended with
PSG?
Yeah, and
why hasn't he extended?
But you're right though. I mean, it will come down to where does he end up, and
that's that here we go will be soul crushing if it's PSG. It'll be soul crushing because I know what's coming my way. But I've been right.
Yeah,
I've outreported everyone on this. So I really hope that Messi does this, not just for Inter, because I'm a proud season ticket holder. I love this club, and I feel like I've gone way back with this club. The journey for Inter Miami is basically a decade long, and because of the pandemic and how long it took to just get to this point, they're still a club that's in its infancy. But God, we've been talking about Inter Miami for a decade now. I want this for America. I want this for Messi, because the family life opportunities that it presents itself for him to actually make a huge impact here in the United States and really crack open this market. I want it for the league. A lot of people, a lot of friends of mine stand to make a lot of money if Messi comes into this league. I'm looking at one of them right now, and I think it would just be fantastic. And I think it would be so important to get this player in at this age rather than 2 years from now, because right now he's the best player in the world. This isn't Beckham. Beckham was a celebrity, but Beckham wasn't regarded as top 15 in the world when he came over to MLS. He was certainly one of the most famous people on the planet. He had a special set piece quality about him, but this is a player that's bossing games. This is the best player in the world. And it'd be so great to see if he can do it against Bruce Arena's New England Revolution. I want this so badly. And I feel not overly confident, because this is such a weird game. His dad handles his business dealings.
It's such a massive game too. Like, it's such a high stakes.
Yeah.
You're dealing with one of the richest clubs in the world.
You gotta hedge your bets. And if you're watching some of the best reporters right now, there's been a lot of hedging outside of his biographer, who all respect to him. He wrote a biography on Messi. I'm sure he's got his good sources. Who's been flatly wrong this entire time. His information's been garbage on it. Like, everybody else that's been reporting on this has been hedging, because they know it's odd.
Which is a huge credit to Inter Miami, by the way. Not like to toe the company line, but the fact that you've gotten this far is pretty damn impressive with the biggest player in the world. We've talked about
two-club race. It's Inter Miami and PSG.
Not his boyhood club, in which he's won multiple Champions League and is one of the, probably the biggest club in the world in terms of what they've achieved in the game. It's either them or Real Madrid. Not another league with massive amounts of money like the Saudi League, which has been floated out there. Not a big Premier League club. Not a big Champions League club. It's two. It's Inter Miami and it's PSG. And the fact that you've gotten to this point and it's legit and there's smoke to this fire, and you've reported and other outlets have reported, he's close to going to Miami. Now, how close? We don't know. Only they know.
The manager gave voice to this. Neville gave an interview and said, yes, there's truth to the dealings that we're having right now with Busquets. I thought the Busquets comment was actually a little bit more interesting than the Messi one, because the cat's out of the bag at this point. The Busquets thing has been a little bit more closely guarded. I think that's just because of the Messi shadow being cast over it. But for Neville to come out, that was a little uncharacteristic. And he'll give you a quote I don't know if he'll be allowed to give any more quotes after this interview that he gave The Athletic.
I mean, the interest, he'll give quotes about players when they're close
Yeah.
or when it's been reported. But like this is such a high stakes. This is so high stakes, and you want to
there's variables here that
you just
if it
don't
goes
know.
sideways,
You just don't know. And
I mean, PSG, Messi's father, MLS, he could wake up one day and feel differently about it. He just had dinner with Jordi Alba and Busquets in Barcelona. What does that mean? How do we read into that? We're now tracking every move. And I can't just flatly tell you he's coming because it's a zero-sum game and you'll kill me for
it. Right. When I think if there weren't the consequences of being wrong, I think you might have a little bit more bravado about this.
Yeah. Oh, but Twitter's going to be a hellscape if I'm right.
But
if
you're right.
If I'm right, oh, the resale market on my tickets is going to be outstanding. There might be a tough conflict for me next week because in Miami I have another home game, and there's a possibility that the University of Miami men's basketball team can win the ACC regular season trophy. And I will tell you that even if Messi comes out at halftime to tell the crowd at the Drive Pink that he is indeed coming on that day, I would skip that in favor of winning an ACC men's basketball.
There it is.
That's your ring light.
That's my ring light. My ring light just went.
Or were you just calling bullshit on me?
No. I mean, I don't know if they say we're introducing Lionel Messi at halftime on Saturday as Inter Miami play host to Philadelphia Union. I feel like you're going to be there.
What's more improbable, given your expertise in sports? Miami Hurricanes men's basketball winning a second regular season ACC trophy, or Lionel Messi coming to Inter Miami, because this is not something that was supposed to be part of the plans. When Miami moved to the ACC, they were supposed to be the football power, and the basketball team was just going to be a flat track for these legacy powers in this conference. Jim Larrañaga, if you extrapolate, and it's hard to do, if you just kind of take away and put in context those 3 years that they were totally burdened by the Adidas scandal and they lost scholarships, he'd have a winning record against Duke and North Carolina. He's been a really good coach. This has been a long time coming, and Miami is legit. They're fun. They're undefeated at home. They've got an FSU opponent that is not been very good on Saturday. They can do this. They're in sole possession of the ACC right now because they beat Virginia, a very good team. They beat them at home because nobody has beaten Miami at home so far this season. This, I think, does bolster the argument for Jim Larrañaga in the Hall of Fame if he does this at this age with this team. Comeback story for the ages, really. I want this so much for that community. There's a lot of old fans that go to these games that are deeply passionate. It is a really cool crowd, and the student engagement just gets better and better with each game. I really want this ACC championship. To me, they could be one and done in the tournament, and the season's an immense success if they win the ACC. I'm going to party my ass off if they take care of business. I'm going to be out there tailgating underneath a metro rail 4 hours before tomorrow's game. Witty, you called plenty of Miami college basketball games back when we were at the University of Miami together and going to classes together. I definitely graduated from this school. You saw a lot of bad basketball, and this has been a joy. All the joy that went away in the Jonathan Huberdeau trade for you has been replaced by this shining beacon in Coral Gables.
Man, they've got to win 2 home games, and they're over the line. They got to beat a terrible FSU team, which, I mean, it would really suck if it
really
came undone.
But this is their
team.
Super Bowl. This is FSU's Super Bowl.
Yeah.
If you remember last year,
but it's also Miami's.
Classic. Yeah. Oh, that's going to be as insane an atmosphere as there has been. Maybe outside of the Virginia game. The Duke game, we were at that game. That was such an ass kicking that it really wasn't a great atmosphere. It was just like a ho-hum ass kicking of Duke. We'll be up for it tomorrow. We're gonna work ourselves into a frenzy tomorrow. Congratulations to Zay Wong. I think he only needs about 500 points to become in tomorrow's game to be Miami's all-time leading scorer. It was a funny meme.
But
Shout out
but the thing about Miami is that if they were bringing in all these pro prospects and they're all top 15 guys in the draft, and they were paying all this NIL money, that'd be one thing. They got Nigel Pack, who was a good college basketball player from Kansas State. He's not like, he's not going number 3 in the NBA draft this fall.
He's a little short, but he might have an NBA game, like an impact player.
But
I mean, he was first team all Big 12. He's legit. He probably has the best NBA prospects out of anybody because Norm Chad O'Meara is a bit of a project. You got to work on him.
But what I'm saying is that like when people when Jim Boeheim says, "Oh, they bought the team" or whatever, like it's ridiculous. They have a good college basketball team, but not like a team with Paolo Banchero who's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. Like they've got a good college basketball team, and you mentioned I was there 10 years ago when they won the ACC regular season and conference championship, and it's good. And that team was like kind of old, experienced, and Shane Larkins had a good pro basketball career.
Yeah, especially in Europe, he's balling out. But he had NBA prospects.
Yeah, this team, he was a first-round pick.
Yeah, this team, I'm not so sure. Zay Wong is older. I think Zay Wong could be a good pro. I like his on-ball tenacity. He's obviously a good scorer. He's one of the best scorers in the history of the program. But considering his age, he's going to take some development. And he's got like second-round pick written on him right now, right? He's going to need a special March.
Yeah, and he's older too, like which is generally a strike against you in the NBA draft. But you got 2 home games: home with FSU, home with Pitt. To go 16-4 in the ACC and put another banner up at the Watsco Center, which, again, this isn't supposed to happen. No. Even if you get a good Big 12 college basketball player from last year in Kansas State, like it's not NBA pro prospects. It's a good college basketball team in the ACC with Duke, who, by the way, are also undefeated at home. They just have been terrible away from home, and the Hurricanes have gone 7-4 on their travels. And so you have this incredibly impressive team that's a top 15 team in the country that could potentially be a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament and win the ACC regular season title. I don't think it can be understated what an enormous achievement that is. At this program, where football is always the thing that this program is known for and wants to be good at, they've put resources behind the basketball program, but it's not what Miami wants to be good at. No. And yet Jim Larrañaga, who was thought of as, he's just here for retirement. No, dude, the guy is program built for more than a decade. I hope that they see this job out because it's just so impressive to stick a middle finger up to the Virginias, the Dukes, the North Carolinas, the Syracuses, even the Notre Dames and the Louisvilles, who are rock bottom of the conference. Those are more traditional basketball powers. And yet Miami have managed to become not a traditional basketball power, but a team that you have to respect in this conference every year.
Yep.
Like they used to, every year they were picked 12th to finish in the ACC.
And sneakily, they're putting guys in the NBA, real contributors. If you look across some of the better teams in the NBA, there's surprising Miami connections right now. They're building a history, and that was really not part of the plans when they made this move that most Hurricanes football fans hate because they've had zero success when it comes to the ACC. But this has been one of the surprises of this move. It elevated the basketball program. Jim Larrañaga was such an inspired choice because he wasn't sexy. He was out of George Mason. He made a Final Four with George Mason, but I mean, look at him. He's not sexy. Yeah. I mean, he is to me, but especially when he starts yelling, like, oh my God, he got it. There was one game where he got a tech. I saw him in a totally different light.
The loud whistles, the whistles are great.
And if he wins a second ACC, he's basically like Pedro Pascal for me. That's my whole pass, Jim. So that you got that looking forward to. You got that to look forward to, and totally forget all about my tweets after that Dayton loss last year. It's not even like the turnaround from a couple of years ago. It's a turnaround from last season, and there's
like 18 months ago.
There's great examples of that. The development of the players on this roster. Zay is not absent from that, even though Zay has been pretty much a good player his entire time here at Miami. But Norm Chad O'Meara, he was at Arkansas State. You look at him, he's the best player on the floor for Miami. He's a defensive force. He's a monster on the glass. He's put together. I talked to Miami football people. I'm desperately trying to get him to play tight end. He is an incredible talent, but he wasn't this incredible prospect. He's Nicaraguan. He's already the greatest basketballer in the history of that nation. Wooga Poplar, a player that was scared to shoot. And the game turned against Kansas with foul trouble, and Kansas just deciding we don't have to guard that guy. He's turned into a very respectable player inside the ACC. This has been coached. This is built. This is not bought. They brought in Nigel Pack. He's been good lately. He got off to a really slow start. They're undefeated at home. There is a lot of times that other players, whether it be Miller, Omir or Zay Wong really put up some great games while Nigel Pack was finding his way. And to dismiss it the way that Jim Boeheim did, I know I'm 2 weeks already on this Jim Boeheim thing, but it was so insulting and so dismissive of the hard work that Jim Larinaga and this Miami basketball staff and those players have put in, because this has been earned over time. And it would be a great crowning achievement. And it would be one of the happiest moments in my Miami Hurricanes supporting life if they win this regular season ACC tournament. And I really hope that they do. So please, there are some tickets available, I think, especially if not on Ticketmaster, the secondary market. I know it's a hot ticket in town. Get out to the Watsco, tailgate under the Metro Rail, and let's will this team to this ACC. And part 1 goes down tomorrow night at the Watsco. And hopefully I can leave at halftime so I can drop my daughter off and sprint up to Boca Raton to watch my Miami soccer club.
Are you training? Are you training? I mean, tomorrow of the day of days to take the train up to Fort Lauderdale.
I can't take the train. I'm too far west. There's no train for me to hop onto. So I gotta just like really race the clock to get to the Drive Pink. And now with this Apple deal, thank you very much, Chris Whittingham. I can't count on a 7:00 start actually starting at 7:37. In MLS.
Every game kicks off at 7:39. We're going.
All right. I'm looking forward to it, Witty. Congrats again on the Apple deal. Let's go Inter Miami. I'll say it for you because you're supposed to be unbiased, even though you're presently dressed as a heron. For those that are just listening, he's been dressed as a heron the entire time.
I'm in all pink.
Yeah, and go Canes. And we don't have to be unbiased about that because we're 2 very proud graduates of the University of Miami. So go Canes, go Herons. Thank you for indulging in this very self-indulgent podcast for a very specific niche of a local audience. Inter Miami fans and Miami Hurricane fans. Got plenty of good stuff on the feed today, and we'll talk to you later.